Hello, and welcome to episode 530 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. And with me, as always, is my co-host, author and historian, good buddy, John Parshall. How are you this October the 28th, John?
How did we get here? I am
Yeah.
great, actually. Just got back last week from doing a little trip down to Texas. I was speaking
Hmm.
at the Greenville World War II History Roundtable, and I have the coffee cup from the Audie Murphy Museum to prove it. So yeah, just wanted to give a shout out again to the roundtable, to Ron, to David, who squired me all over the place.
Hmm.
Skipper Steely, Kevin, and all the rest of the gang. It was fun to have my co-author Tony Tully up there for that talk as well. It's good to see
It's
him.
awesome.
And just wanted to say hello to Debbie and her son, and Brandon and Chuck and John, Mag, and everybody else who turned out. Hope you had a good time. I certainly had a good time, and hope to see you all again sometime in the future. So there you go.
Yeah, those are really good people. I went
Yeah,
back in the summertime, I think it was, and I went over there, and they were just outstanding human beings. They're
yeah,
really, really good people. It's a good
yeah.
little
So,
organization. So,
yep, very generous host. So I had a
yeah.
good time.
Outstanding. Outstanding. All right. Well, we got an interesting one. To be clear, we said last week we were going to get into the Malaya ground campaign.
And we lied,
We
as we
lied.
so often do, right? Because capriciously looking over the timeline of things, it seemed to make sense to actually pivot and take care of this episode, which is Force Z, which is why I'm rocking the maritime blue today, because we're going to
There
do a
you go.
little naval action. Because the destruction of Force Z actually happens right before the first major ground battle in Malaya, which is at Jitra. So yes, we are yanking the carpet, and we're going to go over and do Force Z, and then we'll get back to some ground combat.
And twist my arm because this is
Okay.
one of those events that's like it's
Oh,
I don't want to say it's cool, but it's definitely interesting.
yeah, it's
For
interesting.
sure. All right. So the big gun ship, the battleship, queen of the seas, the symbol of a nation's naval might and global influence and power for decades, especially in the early 20th century. Enormous, heavily armed and heavily armored battleships were seen by all nations as a show of force or an application of force should the need arise. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt saw the battle wagon as a power projection tool, especially when he deployed the battleship heavy Pacific Fleet to Pearl Harbor in 1940 to act as a deterrent to the Japanese in their ongoing war in China and expansion in Asia. Well, we know how that turned out. Winston Churchill felt that a similar action would prove to be a deterrent to the same people in October 1941. With tensions rising in the Malayan region in late 41 and the PM desiring to send a message, Churchill, against the advice of the Admiralty, had orders cut for the deployment to the Pacific of what he called fast modern ships. The battleship Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS Repulse sailed from Scapa Flow and Ceylon, respectively, and arrived together in the port of Singapore on the 2nd of December, 1941. Named Force Z, the battleship force, it was thought, would prove to be both a deterrent and, if necessary, a response to any sort of rash action that the Japanese may execute in said region. Predictably undeterred, the Japanese not only did not flinch when the battleships arrived in theater, they licked their chops. For the Royal Navy, rulers of the world's oceans for millennia, they were about to get a crash course in new naval warfare in the Pacific Ocean from the architects themselves. So, John,
Here I'm going to slag on you for saying millennia. It's centuries, not
centuries.
millennia.
But
Okay.
millennia sounds good,
I
though,
know it
you know.
sounds great,
Sounds
right? And
dramatic.
yeah,
Sounds dramatic. All right, so set the stage
like the
for us
president.
again. What?
Yeah.
Set the stage for us again. Why the hell are these two ships and destroyers, escorts too, that
Yeah,
are coming out there? Why are they being sent out there? Give us the lowdown on.
sure.
Yeah,
So
let us know.
the basic deal is that Churchill is trying to, play the deterrence card in just the same way that FDR was playing the deterrence card at Pearl Harbor. And if you look at the sort of the Royal Navy's experience in the early portions of this war, once Tirpitz got up into the fjords of Norway, you had this sort of standoff situation where you've got
Hmm.
a fleet in being in the form of Tirpitz and some of the other heavy units, the heavy cruisers and the battle cruisers and that kind of thing. And that tied down a lot of British naval forces to kind of keep Tirpitz penned up there. And so Churchill is trying to play the same card here in Singapore. That if I put a flying squadron of a couple of fast combatants, that is going to give the Japanese pause and hopefully prevent them from doing anything rash in the area. At the same time, too, by showing the flag, it's going to buck up morale in Malaya and also importantly in Australia and New Zealand. So that's the drill. The Admiralty is not happy about this because they think that if you're really going to put a credible deterrent in there, it needs to be larger than just two capital ships. It would be
Yeah.
nice to have some aircraft carriers. The only other battleships that are kind of available at this time are some of the R class, the Revenge class, and they are old and slow and really not fit to stand in the line of battle if we can possibly avoid it. And the Admiralty is telling Churchill it's going to take us time to scrape up additional assets to bring out here.
Mhm.
We shouldn't stick our neck out until we've actually got those assets in place. But Churchill overrules them and says time is more important at this point than force. The clock is ticking. The Japanese are getting more aggressive by the day. We've got to send this force out there, and so that's why Admiral Tom Phillips shows up with Prince of Wales and Repulse on the 2nd of December.
So let's talk about Prince of Wales. Prince of
Yeah,
Wales is a King George V class battle wagon. She's commissioned in 41. She actually, which I thought was kind of interesting, she actually sees her first action in 1940.
right.
Before she is commissioned, she's attacked while
Yeah,
she's fitting out, and
yeah,
she's tied up to a pier, and she
yeah,
takes a hit, well, a near miss, and it caused some significant flooding where she actually
yeah,
takes a list. She takes a 10-degree list. This is all before she ever really sees action, if you will,
yeah.
and
No,
before
she
she,
was she
yeah,
was part of the action in the Denmark Strait against the Bismarck.
sure, yeah,
And yeah, she's got civilian workers aboard her, and she
hmm
had all sorts of mechanical problems. Her gun mounts were not fully commissioned, and so she was not getting off the kind of rate of fire that you would normally expect in that action. And of course, that's the action where Hood is
yeah,
vaporized by
right.
Bismarck. So yeah, not exactly a happy welcome to combat. And one of the comments that gets made, actually, I should give another shout out to our mutual friend Mike Whitby, who
hmm
turned me on to this book, The Fighting Admirals, which I found very interesting. And one of the things that Martin Stephen makes the point is that Prince of Wales is not a particularly happy ship, and she had never really had an opportunity to work up fully because just given the pressing nature of the war situation, yeah, she went to sea to fight the Bismarck before she was even commissioned, and after that, she's a working ship, and yeah, she has to be at sea because the war situation demands it.
Yeah, and there's a reason that when naval warships are commissioned, after they're commissioned, rather they do they go do trials and they go out
Yeah,
and make sure things are working right, and the crew trains, and what isn't working right, they go back into the yard and they fix it and they tweak
yeah,
it, and then and only then are they ready to go out and join the fleet. Well, that never happens for Prince of Wales at all. Well, it later to a degree, but still it's not what you would want
yeah.
for a capital ship. And, she kind of earns the bugaboo of a Jonah, really, because
Mhm.
bad things happen when Prince of Wales is around more often than not, even though she is the one that scored the hit on Bismarck that, initially
Right.
made Lutyens go, maybe we ought to turn around and
Yeah.
go home.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
she is a modern ship because she is quite literally brand spanking new.
Yeah.
However, the other ship that is being sent with her, and we'll get to the armament on these two vessels in just a minute, specifically the AAA. The other ship that's going to be part of this force is HMS Repulse.
Yeah.
And Repulse ain't a modern
Mm.
ship by any means of
No.
the term, not at all.
Yeah, she's a World War One era combatant, late World War One. She's a battle cruiser. I think she's a lovely vessel. I think she's a beautiful ship,
Beautiful. Yeah.
beautiful lines, but yeah, has not been up up armored and upgraded in the sense that her sister ship had been. And the result is that, yeah, she's still kind of rocking, a 1916 era protection scheme with a little additional deck armor and that kind of thing. But yeah, this is not the kind of ship that you would want to get into a fracas against a mainline opponent battleship. She's not built to stand up for it, and neither is her anti-aircraft suite really up to the drill in terms of
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Not at
And
all.
you and I were kind of going back and forth on just King George V battleships in general, which were
I think they're
I
pretty. I think they're cool.
yeah, I don't know. I've never liked the way they looked. I don't know. There's something about the fact that the front glacis plate on their turrets is just completely 90 degrees, doesn't have any
Hmm.
slope. There's just it is weird how people, kind of fixate on the aesthetics of their ships, and different people have different aesthetics. But
Yeah.
the big problem for King George V in
Prince of
terms,
Wales. Prince of Wales.
yeah, well, just the class in
Oh, the
general. I
class.
was
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say, just in vis-a-vis more modern combatants, the post-treaty battleships, is that the British really are trying to adhere to the treaty, and so those ships are all armed with 14-inch guns,
Yes.
whereas the majority, of those era battleships are at least 15-inch, and in the case of the Americans, are 16-inch, and then you got Yamato, which doesn't really count.
Right.
Um, but yeah, one of the reasons that the British have been so paranoid about turpets, frankly, is that those KGVs really don't stack up particularly well against turpets, I don't think. Certainly not in the sort of short range, flat trajectory gunfights that the Bismarck class were optimized for. So the result is that the British kind of viewed turpets with, I think, something verging on paranoia. And you'll
Hmm.
see in the early part of the war that in a lot of cases they have an American battleship up there in Scapa Flow as well.
Washington.
Washington is there for months and months and months. I think Washington would have absolutely, blown turpets out of the water, particularly
Yeah.
in a long range gunfight. But anyway, the King George V vessels, I would argue, are the weakest of the treaty era battleships. They are, though, fairly heavily protected. Anyway,
And they do for excuse me, for British battleships of the time, 1940, 41, they're fairly stout compared, not so much when compared to American ships, but they're fairly stout when it comes to AAA to a
mm-hmm.
degree. They got a lot of barrels, but the barrels, unfortunately, don't really do a
Right,
whole hell of a lot. They got a lot
right,
of them,
yeah,
but they don't. We're not talking USS South Dakota 1944 era of
right.
AAA by any means of the term.
Yeah. So the secondaries that are on the King George V are 5.25 inch, and you wouldn't think that there would be that big a difference in rate of fire and that kind of thing between a weapon like the 5-inch 38 that we use on our warships and a 5 1/4 inch, but there is. The rate of fire on these 5 1/4s is lower, and yeah, they're just not as good an anti-aircraft weapon as the 5-inch 38. Likewise, whereas at the beginning of the war, we don't have a lot of ships that have 40 millimeter Bofors on
Right.
them either. But the primary automatic weapon on these ships is the 40 millimeter pom pom. And I actually kind of like the pom pom. The pom pom is I think, a very cool looking weapon. With all those little
Mhm.
short barrels and doing
It's
its
like a
little thing.
hedgehog.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is kind of a hedgehog, but it doesn't have nearly the range and the stopping power that a Bofors did. And so and they've got a few Orlikins on them as well, I believe. But yeah, the bottom line is that from an anti-aircraft standpoint, even the more modern of these two, the Prince of Wales is adequately armed but not robustly armed, and the Repulse is not very well armed at all. She's got some 4-inch triple A in both single mounts and in some cases in triple mounts, and those mounts are not well liked. They're too heavy. They don't traverse very well. And she's got some 20 millimeter Oerlikons on her as well. But yeah, she does not have a lot in the way of anti-aircraft firepower.
Well, you say the Ehrlichans, to the exact number, seven 20 millimeters were on Prince of Wales and
Yeah,
eight were on Repulse. The
right.
one thing you talked about the secondaries on POW is that the 5 inchers, they had a very, very high firing arc. So
Yeah,
they could not go straight up, and they were dual purpose. They were secondaries and they were also anti-aircraft, but to your point exactly, 8 rounds a minute is what
yeah.
they could pump out, which is ain't gonna cut it.
Which is about half what a 5 inch 38 can do. And the other thing about the mounts on Prince of Wales is that they were relatively slow to traverse, and so they had
Mhm.
difficulty tracking low flying aircraft because they couldn't slew the mount around quick enough to actually track those planes. So that's another failing of that particular mount. Anywho,
So one of the other things that of course we have in American combat vessels, and obviously the British will get later, but they don't have right now is adequate AAA fire control.
mm-hmm,
So to your point of tracking of a target, it's great if you can see it, but if you can't get your guns on it in time to shoot it, it really doesn't matter. And that's
right,
kind of what happens here too. And the 5 inch guns on Prince of Wales are good at shooting, relatively good at shooting high flying level targets.
right,
Not so much, as you were saying,
yep,
at fast moving, swift, low flying torpedo aircraft, as we're going to see.
yep,
Um, so let's talk about the air search and fire control radar on Prince of
yeah,
Wales. It's a Type 279 air warning
mm-hmm,
radar, is what she had on her.
yep, and that can reach out theoretically to 100 miles. The problem is that once they get the ship into the tropics, they have real problems keeping that radar in surface. In fact, during the action itself, it's going to be broken, and they were unable to, get spare parts in for it in time. So they've got problems in the radar department here too. Not so good.
Mhm.
The other thing is that just in general, Prince of Wales is not air conditioned, nor is Repulse, and when you're operating in the tropics with that, that's a problem too. Of course, most ships weren't, but this is something that her crew is having to adjust to rapidly as they come down from Scapa Flow, they end up in the tropics. It's like Jesus, it's hot here. So yeah,
Humid as all get out. You know the bulkheads were sweating in that thing.
yep, absolutely,
So let's talk about Admiral Thomas Phillips.
yeah,
Admiral Thomas Phillips. Who is he? He gets there on the 2nd of December.
mm-hmm,
And by there I mean Singapore. Um, as does Prince of Wales. And we kind of talked about this last week when he pulls into Singapore with that battleship. There's a lot of ballyhoo, a lot of hoorah,
absolutely,
all across the press.
yeah,
People, it's
cameras.
a big deal.
It's a big deal, and it's supposed to be a big deal. I mean, that's the purpose for having sent them out, is to kind of, yeah, ballyhoo that these vessels are now here in Singapore. He's sailed around the Cape of Good Hope with Prince of Wales. He actually stopped in at South Africa, had an interview with Jan Smuts, the prime minister down there as well, and yeah, now he ends up in Singapore. Phillips is an interesting guy. I think he's kind of a tragic figure, honestly. He gets slagged immediately after the war in some of the official histories by Stephen Roskill as being, completely blind to the potential of air power, and he just, sort of gets scapegoated as a big gun guy and nothing but a big gun guy. He is physically small. He was known as Tom Thumb. He's also just flat out brilliant, really smart individual. He was promoted to lieutenant at age 20 because he was so quick on the uptake. And he's now just been double promoted in just a matter of months to full admiral and is commander of the Far Eastern Fleet of the Royal Navy. And there's, some jealousy that comes along with that, honestly, from some other people, particularly Cunningham, who see him as, not necessarily having been deserved as to be moved up in the ranks that quickly. But he's very bright. He's quick-witted. He's decisive. He is socially adept. Um, he's not necessarily a big gun guy. He actually learned the majority of his trade in destroyers. He had been an early favorite of Winston, but by the time we get to 1941, the fact that Phillips was not in favor of the strategic bombing campaign that's been going on, and also was not a fan of Churchill's decision to pump reinforcements into Greece, he's
Yes.
now on the outs with the prime minister. So that's, yeah, not necessarily such a good thing. In terms of his outlook around what aircraft could do to a battleship, and
Mhm.
that's really sort of the nub of the matter, right? And I think what you've got going on here is ex post facto, it becomes obvious to everyone that, oh my God, torpedo aircraft really can do nasty things to capital ships. But based on the information that Phillips has in his hands and the war experience to date, he's within his rights to think that if the Japanese come after him with high altitude level bombers, he's probably going to be okay because he's got a decent anti aircraft suite for that sort of thing. And, when the Italians had tried doing this kind of thing in the Mediterranean, they hadn't been terribly successful with those sorts of tactics against British warships. There had been a convoy in September called Halberd that was attacked by no fewer than 62 Italian aircraft, a mixed package of level bombers, dive bombers, and torpedo planes. And that convoy had gotten off relatively well. Granted, they had had some air support in the form of carrier aircraft there, and their anti-aircraft fire was also heavier than what Prince of Wales and Repulse collectively can do. But nevertheless, it seems like capital ships should be able to survive in that sort of an environment. The problem, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, is that Phillips doesn't understand just how good Japanese torpedo planes are. And he's not an outlier in that respect. I mean, nobody understands how
Right.
good the Japanese are in this respect. And so that ignorance is going to really turn around and bite him in the butt when we get into this battle.
So before the battle
Yeah.
occurs, Phillips he does a couple of things. One, he deploys Repulse. He sends Repulse to Darwin on
Mm-hmm.
a, as you said, a flag waving mission. Really, just
Yeah.
be like, hey guys, see we are here, that kind of a thing. He gets word of Japanese transports moving on the 6th of December and immediately calls for Repulse like, no, come home.
Yeah.
But also in here, and I did not put this in the notes because there's a lot of fish fash back and forth with this, is he goes to Manila. And there's and hear me out on this. He goes to Manila. Phillips, and there's no question about this. He does. He
Yeah.
goes to Manila and he starts talking to our good
Tommy Hart,
buddy Tommy Hart and Dougie Mack
Dougie Mack.
and starts asking essentially, and this is before the United States is at war, mind you.
Yeah.
He starts asking, hey, if this goes down, can we expect any kind of support from you guys? What can you do? And some sources say MacArthur promises his support of American destroyers, which MacArthur had no ability to do that. He
Right.
can't. He's
Yeah.
not in the Navy.
Right.
And other sources say it's Thomas Hart, which Hart technically could, but he can't without approval from CNO and all this other jazz. So I'm unclear as to exactly what the conversation was that
Yeah.
occurred there, because the promise is supposedly that he comes back to Singapore with nobody in Manila could authorize without the
Right.
okay from
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., which, by the way, they do not get. But regardless of this, he is aware, Phillips is aware that the situation is deteriorating. This is before the transports are on the move, mind you, that
Yeah.
the situation is deteriorating badly. And
Yeah.
he knows exactly what you said just a little while ago, is that the two battle wagons and what, four or five destroyers,
Four destroyers. Okay, and that's another thing that we haven't talked about. His
right?
screen is pathetically weak.
Yes. And he
You know,
winds up replacing a couple too in between there.
yeah, exactly. I mean, these are older vessels in some cases, and just screening two capital ships with just four destroyers is ludicrous. You should
Yeah.
have three times that many, and but again, that just goes to show you that the Royal Navy at this point is just stretched like a rubber band with all of their other commitments, and they just haven't got the ships.
And I mean, the same could be said for the United States Navy, certainly in the
Yeah,
Philippines too, because Thomas Hart's Asiatic Fleet, and we'll do an episode or two or three on the Asiatic Fleet. Yes,
yeah,
it is nothing to write home about.
yeah,
So, the threat was there. He recognized the threat of the Japanese expansion and what it potentially could do to the area, and he goes and asks for help. What help he actually gets promised to him, I have significant doubt
yeah,
of the veracity of the claims, but
yeah. And this just points out too some of the problems that the Allies as a whole are having in this. Just before the war starts, there is no unified command structure
right,
whatsoever. There's no coordination between the naval forces. And so if you look at the Far East in general, what you see is three concentrations of Allied warships. You've got an American small fleet, with nothing bigger than a light cruiser.
right.
Um, or I guess Houston's out
It's a
there
heavy
too.
cruiser.
It's
Houston's
a
heavy
heavy
cruiser,
cruiser,
yeah.
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 Basically clustered around the Philippines. You've got Force Z now down at Singapore, and you've got, small agglomeration of some cruisers and destroyers that the Dutch have in the Indies. They're not coordinated in any way, and obviously they're all separated from each other by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of ocean, which means that the Japanese are going to have the luxury of picking the time and place of their onslaughts, and can cherry pick those formations if they want to. So not a good situation.
which is kind of what they do. So,
Yeah,
to a degree. So, fast forwarding to the 6th of December, when the Japanese transports are on the move, he gets word, Phillips gets word, and like I said, he immediately recalls Repulse, and he orders Prince of Wales to sortie.
yeah,
Like I said in the notes, his intention is to have Repulse, which obviously they do, join up, and the ships would move into the Gulf of Siam. And we'll get into the exact details here in a minute. But
yeah,
what he felt like he could do, at least at this initial stage, is basically what the Germans don't try, do in the Atlantic here and there, is take these two battle wagons and stick them in the middle of these transports and shoot the ever loving crap out of them.
yep,
Obviously, before the Japanese start landing
right,
on points therein. So,
yeah. And
um,
we'll
it,
we'll have a map here of
yes.
what we're talking about. This is in the Gulf of Thailand, Gulf of Siam, if you will. So yeah, the Japanese are moving towards these landing beaches in the northern part of Malaya and also the southern part of Thailand. And yeah, his notion is that I'm going to sally forth from Singapore with my group of six vessels, and I'm going to go in and shoot up those transports. Uh, and we should explicitly say this is pretty brave on his part.
Yeah, pretty
You
ballsy.
know, if you realize that deterrence has failed, and with on the 6th, it's becoming increasingly clear that the Japanese are not going to be deterred, then if you really want to keep a fleet in being, the more defensive move is to take these two warships and move them back to Ceylon, or some place that is out of reach of the Japanese entirely. But Phillips makes the decision that I can't let the army down like that. I've got to at least try to intercept this invasion convoy. And so, yeah, I'm going to stick my neck out here into the Gulf of Thailand and see if I can't destroy these forces.
So, what do the Japanese know of the arrival of POW and
They
Repulse,
know.
and what do they do?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the Japanese dispositions here are tricky because obviously their carrier fleet is all off doing Pearl Harbor at this
Right.
point. And meanwhile, uh, first the first battleship division and the second battleship division, which are the heavier gunned ships in the Japanese Navy, are back in home waters. So that's Nagato, Mutsu, and the four older but heavier armored battleships, Ise, Hyuga, Fuso, and Yamashiro. Those are all in Japan. Two of the fast battleships, they got four Congo class battleships. Two of them are with Nagumo and the Pearl Harbor raid. That leaves just two other Congo class battleships down south with Kondo's forces that are covering these various invasion fleets. Kondo does not think that his two Congos are in a good place because, yeah, they can tangle with Repulse, but they haven't got the deck armor to stand up to Prince of Wales. And the result is a little bit of scrambling on the part of the Japanese. Basically, Yamamoto is disinclined to try to send his battle fleet down there to tangle with these two, and he makes the statement that we've found in Senshi Sosho. He says, "We can't be so extravagant as to use battleships in the game of chess against the U.S. and Britain. We have to think about eating the king with a pawn. I think that a daring attack by the torpedo aircraft force will be enough to finish them off." And that's really bold. I mean, he
Yeah.
is now betting on air power to do in enemy capital ships, and that's never been done before. So, there's a real contrast here between the doctrine of these two opponents.
Yes.
So what ends up happening is they've already got two air groups that are down in this neck of the woods. The Japanese do the Genzan and Mihoro air groups, which are armed with G3M Nell
Nels.
aircraft. But
Mhm.
they decide to bring in a squadron of ringers in the form of the Kanoya Air Group, which is specially trained to operate with torpedoes. This is their whole gig. This is what they do. And so they fly Kanoya down there from Taiwan at the last minute. And they also have to bring down a transport ship with torpedoes because there aren't enough torpedoes in Southeast Asia to arm all of the aircraft, these three different squadrons that are going to be down there. So they send this transport down there and it is going to pull up in Saigon on like the 7th of December, um, which again is the day before hostilities are going to commence on the 8th on the other side of the international date line. So this is a very kind of near run thing in terms of getting torpedoes into the hands of these specialists who are going to be used to attack Prince of Wales and Repulse.
So this is the second unit, IJN unit to be armed. I gotta say armed, field the Bettys, the G4Ms.
Yeah.
And as you said, that these guys are specially trained
Yep.
as torpedo droppers. These aren't
Yep.
your normal medium bomber crews. These guys, like you said,
Uh,
they're ringers. These are meant to kill
yeah.
warships.
This is what they do. Although, to be clear, even when we think about an aircraft like the Nell, the G3M, this aircraft was designed from the ground up to be a torpedo plane. It is not a
Hmm.
medium bomber in the sense that we would look at an aircraft like, say, the Heinkel HE
B-26 or
111,
something.
right? Yeah, or yeah, B-25s or B-26s. Um, the Japanese had always viewed these medium bombers as being components in the overall battle plan for the decisive sea battle. And so the specs for these particular aircraft, starting with the G3M, emphasized extremely long range at the expense of payload, but they've got to be able to lug a torpedo out to a fairly long range because, again, if you're thinking you're going to fight a decisive sea battle in some place like the Marshall Islands, you've
Yeah,
got to have the
get
legs
out
on
there.
these planes. You got to get out there. So, just by way of comparison, if you look at the HE 111, that's a plane that's got a ferry range of only 1,200 nautical miles, and it can carry about 4,400 pounds of bombs. Then the sort of the Italian equivalent is the SM-79. That's got a range of about 1,400 nautical miles and about a 2,600 pound payload, including a torpedo. That's a pretty credible torpedo plane too. But you look at the Nell, the range on the G3M is 2,400 nautical miles, but only an 1,800 pound payload. And then the G4M, the Betty, is a 2,700 nautical mile range and about the same, 1,900 pound payload. So these planes were designed to reach out, and they've got the legs to get all the way across the Gulf of Siam with a torpedo if need be. And so but the British don't know this. That's the kicker, is
Mm.
that the British do not understand the range that these aircraft have. Phillips is operating under the impression that if he is more than 300 or so miles away from the Japanese air bases, he should be in good shape. And the reality is that these planes, even with a torpedo, can reach out to 500 miles or more.
Yeah. All of these guys in the 22nd Air Flotilla are under the command of Rear Admiral Matsunaga Sadaichi.
Mhm.
He could throw, and this is a lot of friggin' aircraft, man.
Yeah,
He could throw 99 aircraft at any allied naval force that is in that
neck of the
region that
woods.
you just talk about, that you
Yep.
just talked about. And they could do both. They could do either high level bombing or, as you said, the torpedo attacking that's gonna eventually do everybody in here.
Yep.
Um, this is a completely, you touched on it just very, very briefly, but I found it to be rather amazing that Yamamoto and Phillips are only separated by 4 years, and
All right.
Yamamoto's actually older.
Yeah.
And their visions of naval warfare at this stage in 1941 are so vastly different. And I mean, you could say that about any really fleet
Allied.
commander.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just it's a completely different way of thinking on how things are going to
Yeah.
unfold.
Yep.
So let's talk about Phillips's plan. Um, he knew that he assumed as much that the Japanese transports that had been spotted were going to come towards Malaya, that they were heading in that direction.
Yep.
And as I said in the notes, it came as absolutely no surprise on December 8th when reports reached him that they had landed on several spots on the Malayan coast.
Hmm.
Um, and as you said, or going to say next week, is that once the Japanese land, they immediately run over the airfields, a lot of the airfields up north, and the
Yep.
situation it's like a house of cards. It starts folding down
Yeah.
pretty damn quick.
Yeah. The RAF very quickly starts losing the battle for air superiority in northern Malaya. And the result of that is going to be that there's not going to be a lot of air cover that would be available to be over Phillips' force. He doesn't have an aircraft carrier with him. There, there's been a common myth that Indomitable was supposed to be along for the party. And actually, there's some newer scholarship that shows that Indomitable had never been actually formally slated to be part of Phillips's force. And then, unfortunately, she goes and ends up getting herself grounded in Jamaica on 2nd November. And so she wouldn't have been available for the
Yep.
party in any case. But the result is that Phillips has no organic air power over his fleet. And if he's going to get any sort of air power, it's going to have to come from the RAF. But the RAF is getting the stuffings beaten out of it in northern Malaya. And so the expectation then becomes that there just isn't going to be any air cover available for this fleet at all. Um, he's concerned about this, and Phillips, raises these concerns to his staff and the weakness in terms of air cover over his fleet. But he and kind of polls his staff and are told by them that yeah, okay, we're concerned too, but we're unanimous in supporting this decision to sail. He leaves his chief of staff, a guy named Arthur Palliser, ashore in Singapore. And so Palliser is supposed to be, liaising with the RAF and whoever else that if there is the possibility of air support, that we would like to have that. Thank you very much. But uh, when Phillips actually sorties and starts getting out there, he gets a report specifically with respect to December 10th from
Mhm.
Palliser that Palliser lets him know that fighter protection on Wednesday the 10th will not, repeat, not be possible because of the collapse of Malaya's outlying airfields. And there's some garbledness around this in that actually Palliser was only referring to the aircraft from one of those airfields, and that shouldn't have been a blanket statement regarding the availability of any air power within Malaya as a whole. But because the message gets kind of condensed to the point of uselessness, Phillips is under the impression that there just aren't going to be any planes available. And that has important implications as he's going through his maneuvers.
Yeah. So, as we said, he wanted to stop the transports before they get in there
Yep.
to drop their troops and gear and supplies. And obviously, now with the Japanese landing,
You're not
that
going to be
ain't
able to do
gonna,
it.
no, that is not going to
Right.
happen. So he intends still to sail and at the very least intercept these transports as they're getting out of there
Yep.
to shoot them up because it's something you mentioned in your book, and I've Yes, guys, I've actually read part of the book, so but
Ah, ah,
but the lack of Japanese transport shipping at this
right.
stage of the war, if Phillips is able to get in there and sink, I don't know, half a dozen or more,
That'd be
that
a
would be
real
pretty significant.
Absolutely. Yeah, the deal is that the Japanese at this point don't have enough assault shipping to make multiple landings simultaneously. So what's
Right.
going to happen here is they've used this first group of ships to move in the initial echelons into Malaya, but they're now going back, and some of them are going to be used to actually bring Hama's 14th Army over to the Philippines because they haven't got enough. Yeah, so they're playing a shell game here is kind of what it comes down to. We're going to move it here, we're going to move it there, we're going to use the same ships to do lots of different
Busy
things.
dudes is what it is.
Yeah, they are. It's that means that the schedule of shipping is, in the words of Sunshi Sosho, like a gigantic clockwork mechanism, and they don't have a lot of slack in the system. So if Phillips had been successful in gunning down a number of these ships, it really would have thrown spanners in the works for the way the offensive as a whole was supposed to be developing towards the Indies.
Hmm. If
If
so, Phillips decides that he is going to sail. And as you put in the notes, any other decision would have had to have come from London, and that
eh,
probably wasn't going to occur at this
right,
moment. And
right,
then in two, I found too that Phillips felt like he had an obligation to do something.
yep,
The Royal Air Force was, as you said, was getting the hell kicked out of it. It was only a matter of time before the ground troops were going to be hit, and it would have been poor form for the Royal
yep,
Navy to say, "See ya,
yeah,
goodbye." That wasn't
yeah,
going to happen. Phillips wasn't
yeah,
going to allow that to happen.
yeah. There are interesting parallels, just thinking about this, with what Kurita ends up facing in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. I mean, by the
Mm,
time he could have gotten to Lingayen Gulf, our transports have already unloaded
pretty
days
much, yeah,
before, right?
yeah, yeah.
Same thing here. It's a matter of timing. If you were really going to intercept the Japanese transports before they landed, you were going to have to declare war on the Japanese first and intercept them out in the Gulf on the 6th and 7th. And, you know,
It's not going to happen.
not going to happen. So, anyway.
So as it is, he plans to intercept the Japanese around Singora on the 10th.
Hmm.
He'd been made aware of a minefield that the Japanese had sown as recently as the day before or something like
Right.
that, with 800 to 900 freaking mines. My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Busy, busy people,
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's a lot of mines.
Yeah, it is.
So, as I put in the notes and you back this up, he knew that this was a risky
Yep.
operation, but as I
Yep.
said, he felt like he had to do absolutely something rather
Yep.
than do nothing at all.
Right.
Damn sure wasn't going to pull out and retreat. So at 1900 on December the 8th, Force Z leaves Singapore.
Yep. At night.
Yep. All right. So several hours after leaving Singapore, that's when he receives a radio message from his chief of staff that a single one
One.
PBY would
Yeah.
search ahead of Force Z, which was not what he had hoped for at all, is it?
No, it's not. Again, and we're looking here. I think there were less than four PBYs, I think, in all of Malaya at this point in time. So the British just don't have a lot of assets to do robust searching. And in fact, one of those PBYs had been shot down by the Japanese immediately before the landings. Um, so yeah, I mean, Phillips is taking this in. He's operating under radio silence and doesn't have an ability to respond. But yeah, he knows at this point that yeah, his scouting assets are
He's on
very
his
minimal.
own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's on his own.
He's blessed with bad weather. And I say he's blessed with bad
Absolutely,
weather because as he's sailing through the bad weather,
he ain't going
Japanese
to be
can't
seen.
see him. Yeah,
Yep,
and conversely, of course, he can't see them either. But it this is a blessing for him, but that weather does start to dissipate at some point later on the 9th.
on the ninth,
Um,
exactly. Yep.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, and as so at 13:45 on the ninth,
Mhm.
as he sails past Anamba and those minefields, he is then spotted by the Japanese submarine I-65. And at 14:15, that submarine sends a report back that two repulse type battleships have been spotted. 2 hours later, that sighting report is handed to Admiral Ozawa aboard the Chokai, which is along uh, with the invasion fleets.
So I found that Ozawa was rather surprised at the
Yeah,
fact that there were two Royal Navy battleships or battlecruiser battleship, whatever the hell you want to call them. You know what I'm
yeah,
talking about, sailing out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I find that to be kind of odd. If Yamamoto knew that, and
right.
Kondo knew that the British had these battleships out there, and Ozawa's like, what? When he gets the
Yeah,
report, that's
right.
kind of, I found that to be kind of odd. I guess that's just a poor communication on the Japanese part here.
Yeah, I guess so. But the bottom line is that he does order the remainder of those transports that are still unloading to, get done and get out. They're
Mhm.
now going to be scooting back into the northern part of the Gulf of Thailand, so hopefully away from any, oncoming British capital ships.
Yeah. That evening around 1600, Matsunaga, who's in charge of the 22nd Air Flotilla, he orders immediately a strike to go find these guys, and he's hoping to catch them before it gets dark. He
Yep.
launches 53 Nells and Bettys, a combination of the two, Genzan and Kanoya air groups. They're carrying torpedoes on all the aircraft with the exception of 9.
Hmm.
Um, and it's they end up, long story short, they end up not being able to catch the British before it starts to get dark.
Yeah.
At 1745, the bad weather that we had talked about that had cloaked the Brits before is now gone. The skies are clear. The British radar that we spoke about earlier does pick up aircraft heading in their general direction from the north. It was roughly about 20 miles away when they picked these
Which isn't
guys
that
up on
far. I mean,
radar. It is not far at all.
yeah.
So this goes to your point about the radar kind of being like, yeah, working and
Yeah,
not
right.
working in the tropics, because something that can reach out to 100 miles,
Right. Only,
damn sure should have found something before it reached 20 miles
yep.
away from Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
Um, and these are actually, they're not the Bettys and the Nells that Matsunaga launches. It's two float planes launched more than likely by Ozawa to try and find the battleships that he just got a report handed to him saying that they're somewhere in the vicinity.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right.
So he sends that sighting report back, and the problem for the airborne strike package at this point is they're not going to be able to get to where Phillips is before night comes down, and
No.
so as a result, ends up radioing out to the strike force to come back home and land, and we're going to try again tomorrow morning.
Yeah. This I found to be rather interesting. As they're out there hunting and pecking,
Yeah.
the Japanese force or Air Force they fly over Ozawa's force
Yes.
and they drop a flare, which, as we know, the
Yes.
Japanese did at night when they
Hmm.
suspected a ship being in the vicinity.
Yep.
Well, the flare lights up Chokai,
Yeah.
and Ozawa is like, "Oh hell no, this ain't
No.
gonna happen,"
He's
because
in
he
very
knows
real
what's coming.
Yeah, he's in very real danger of being torpedoed by his own planes.
Uh-huh.
And I was watching the video on this same incident that Drac did, and he points out that if the Japanese had actually ended up mistakenly torpedoing Chokai, that might have let Phillips off the hook because they have so few torpedoes in their inventory down here in Southeast Asia, which I thought was an interesting comment. Not only could it have been a really disastrous own kill, but it would have, hobnailed hobbled their ability to actually
Hobbled
go
in.
after, yeah, the actual targets in question. But
Because to your earlier point, the amount of torpedoes available to Matsunaga's air group is not
yeah,
infinite. That they
no,
don't have. That's one of
no,
the reasons that he recalls them and doesn't risk, aside from the fact of probably ain't gonna
yeah,
find him anyway, a night
yep,
attack, is he doesn't want to waste the fish.
yeah. He already doesn't have enough torpedoes to arm the 99 aircraft that he's got for even one strike between them. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the flare that is dropped over Chikai is actually seen by the British.
yeah,
They don't, you know, they don't know that's over Chikai. They just see a flare go out in the middle of the damn ocean,
right.
and they're like, the bad guys are probably over there. So Phillips says, not tonight. And he turns around and he gets the hell out of there.
And that then brings us to the morning of December 10th.
So he knows that he's been spotted or likely been spotted.
Yep.
He's pretty aware that his original plan to sail into the middle of the Japanese transports, whether they're before or after launching
Not
or
going to get it
landing
done.
their troops, is probably not going to work.
Yep.
And he also knows that, or assumes as much, that the Japanese are going to have a larger force out there than his, frankly, paltry force that he's got with him. So
Yep.
he errs on the side of caution, decides discretion is a better part of valor, and says, "Hmm,
hmm
maybe we
So
should turn around and head back
yep.
to Singapore."
Yep. So he breaks radio silence at this point and sends a message that I have most regretfully canceled the operation because, having been spotted by aircraft, surprise is lost, and our target would be almost certain to be gone by morning, and the enemy fully prepared for us. He should have also used this opportunity to uh, call for air support if he can possibly get it. But again, he's operating under the assumption that that air support just isn't going to be available. So there you have it.
As he's pulling out of there and heading back to Singapore,
Yep.
Force Z is spotted again by a Japanese submarine, I-58, I-58.
Mm-hmm.
They spot, or it spots Force Z at 0315 that morning. Um, he also receives word that in between all this, Phillips receives words that the Japanese have landed at Kuantan.
Yeah.
And he decides at that point, even he doesn't obviously know that he's been sighted by another submarine, but he decides at that point, well, I couldn't get these transports. Let me see if I can go get these transports. But there's a whole mix up in there, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a huge mix up. If you look at a map of Malaya, Kuantan is way down the Malayan coast, like 400 miles south of where the original landings had been. And so that would have been really sticking the neck out on the part of the Japanese, but you know, Phillips doesn't know any better. And so, even though this report is unsubstantiated, and by the way, his chief of staff, Palliser, did not tell him during this report that, by the way, these reports are unsubstantiated, Phillips makes the decision that instead of heading out of the battle area as rapidly as possible, he's going to divert over to Kuantan, and if there are any Japanese transports there, he's going to go after them. And this is a fateful decision because now he is still going to be within range of those Japanese air groups that are in southern Vietnam.
At 0718, he's about 30 miles away from the coast of Kuantan, or near Kuantan.
Yep.
He launches a Walrus scout plane from one of the battleships. I forget which one, but it doesn't frankly
Yeah.
matter. And within 20 minutes, the news is radioed back to Phillips that there ain't nothing here, brother.
There ain't nothing here. Yep.
There ain't a damn thing
Exactly.
there. So
Yeah.
what Phillips does not know is that the Japanese are already on their way towards him via air, and that
Yes.
attack is going to be coming pretty dang quick. Um, Matsunaga had received the word of the same sighting reports that Kondo had gotten from the subs the night before, and the one that
Mhm.
I-58 that came a few hours previous.
Yep.
So he prepared a dawn search and strike.
Yep.
Uh, that the search was supposed to head out at 05. 90 aircraft were made ready for an attack, and they would take off between 06 and 08 in two
hmm
separate waves. Um, he Matsunaga is he's aware of the presence, but he doesn't, and this is important because this plays a factor in what's going to happen later. He doesn't know where these guys are exactly, despite the fact that they were
Yeah.
sighted by the submarine at 0315.
Right. Yeah, because 3 hours worth of steaming. I mean, they could be,
Could
75
be anywhere.
miles in any direction. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that Genzan takes off at 06:25, and then Kanoya takes off with 26 Betties. Mihoro is gonna take off with 24 Nells shortly after that, and so now the Japanese have got three squadrons, but they're all in separate packages, kind of flying around out there looking for Phillips.
Yeah, this is very similar to what the United States Navy does in, around the attack for the execution really of Yamato, is
Mm,
that we've got people up in the air and we're just waiting for somebody to find them, and then we're going to send everybody over there to go pounce on them. And this
mhm.
is is very, very similar in that these medium bombers are out there just kind of sucking down the fuel. The
Hmm.
pilots are throttling back and they're just kind of hanging out and waiting because as soon as they get the word, they're going to pour on the coal and they're going to go hit the
Yep.
target. Well, all of this is to be said that the Japanese are eating fuel in these
Yep.
aircraft because they still haven't been found. They have not found Repulse and Prince of Wales and their four destroyers at this
Throughout the
stage
morning.
yet. Yeah,
Yep.
so they're running out of time, really, and
Yeah.
fuel.
And then we have an incident that is remarkably similar to the Battle of Midway, in that one of Phillips's destroyers, the Tenedos, has been running low on fuel, and so he detaches that ship to send it back to Singapore directly as he's still mucking around near Kuantan. And it is that ship that is then spotted by one of these Japanese groups, and actually they end up bombing her with nine of these Nells go after her with bombs. They don't hit her, but the fact that she's in this general neighborhood now gives the Japanese a hard data point, and so as a result of that, the Japanese are now going to be vectoring in on that neck of the woods where Tenedos is being bombed.
So right after this occurs, the Japanese aircraft that are airborne, as you know, they're at the end of their fuel
Yeah.
range. I mean, they're going to have to turn around and come back at some point in the very, very near future if something was not spotted like right now. At
Mm-hmm.
10:15, a Japanese searcher does indeed spot Repulse and sends in the contact. Prince of Wales saw the searcher who shadowed the British battleships, not for an eternal long time, but for a while, and
Yep.
just stayed out of AAA range, which has got to be infuriating.
Yep.
And had their had air cover, that might have had a problem, but they didn't. Um,
Yeah.
Phillips knows he's been spotted, yet at this point, he does not break radio silence and say, "Hey, they've spotted me. Can somebody come help me out here?"
Right. And the point that Stevens makes is, again, operating under the assumption that Palliser's earlier signal is correct, why break radio silence to ask for something that you know is unavailable?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is unfortunate because there actually is a squadron of Brewster Buffaloes that
Hmm.
were available in this neck of the woods that, had they been scrambled in time, might have actually made an impact on the battle. But because Phillips does not break radio silence here for reasons that are comprehensible, the result is that those planes are not going to be scrambled until very late in the affray.
At 10:40, the radar aboard Prince of Wales picks up the incoming aircraft, and at 1100, they're spotted visually coming in
Mm-hmm.
from the southwest at about 10,000 feet. So these are more than likely going to be a level
These are
bombing
Nells.
attack, and it
Yep.
indeed is.
Yep.
It's the Nells from Mihoru. Ku First Squadron are the guys that are coming in here. And this is kind of interesting, but I understand the way they're doing this. They're coming in, the Japanese are in a line abreast. They're
Mm-hmm.
coming in this big long line as they're coming along to basically saturate the area around these two battleships to hopefully hit one of them.
Yep.
Um, when they're coming in, Phillips does what he's frankly supposed to do. He keeps, he's basically fishtailing. He's maneuvering rapidly, trying to get his battleships the hell out of the way
Yep.
so they don't get hit. But unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, the British AAA can't and doesn't track a target very well.
Yeah.
And each turn that these battle wagons are making is throwing off their aim just that much longer.
Right.
Um, it,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, radical maneuvers for any warship at this point in time. If you're using an analog fire control computer, they have real problems if you start making radical maneuvers of the ship, because that throws off the ship's own course inputs that are going into that computer and makes it difficult to generate a solution.
Yeah.
So, and we actually have a pretty famous shot from this particular um,
Hmm.
incident that shows, the sort of S-shaped wakes that both of these ships are making, and it also shows the splashes of a string of one of these about nine bombs that get dropped on Repulse. as well as the puff of smoke from what ends up happening, because Repulse does end up getting tagged by one of these bombs.
Yep, it's a 250 kilogram bomb. It goes through her aircraft hangar, uh, into the Royal Marines mess deck and explodes against the armor deck just above the boiler room. The bomb hit is actually
Pretty
relatively
negligible.
light. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
do a whole heck of a lot to Repulse. Some minor fires were started, but by and large, it really didn't do anything to her. She could still maneuver, she could still
yeah.
keep up speed, and she was just fine. Five Japanese aircraft are damaged by the British AAA to
Mhm.
make emergency landings at Kota Baru, which is a newly captured airfield.
Yeah, yeah, they just grabbed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that brings us then to the first torpedo attacks.
So coming on the heels of the bombing attack that lightly damaged Repulse is a torpedo attack. This is the first torpedo attack coming in. It's about 10 minutes after the Nells flew over the horizon. The first Nells flew over the horizon. Prince of Wales's radar picks up more aircraft coming in two separate formations.
Yep,
These are two squadrons from Genzan Ku's 17 Type 96 Nells.
yep.
Um, a gentleman named Lieutenant Takai of the
Mhm.
second squadron recalled, and I quote, at exactly 1303, a black spot was sighted directly beneath the cloud ahead of us. Soon we could distinguish the ships. The fleet was comprised of two battleships escorted by three destroyers. The battleships were the long-awaited Prince of Wales and Repulse, unquote. So the Japanese were clearly, obviously, knew exactly what they were going after at this
Absolutely.
point. And they start in on a very gradual descent to make their
Pick up some
torpedo
speed.
run. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So they send 9 aircraft heading for Prince of Wales, and they send 8 after the Repulse. And they're going to do, what good torpedo planes do. They're going to go at the battleships from their bow, and they're going to execute a hammer and anvil attack on both of these ships. So at this point, Phillips obviously understands that evasive maneuvers are going to be needed. And so he's increased speed to 25 knots and now signals to both of his heavies to be maneuvering independently.
Mm.
Yeah.
I found this curious too, that despite the aircraft coming in for a low, dropping down, he
Right.
apparently believed that they were level bombers, that they were not torpedo aircraft, because as yet
Yep.
he had not seen any medium bombers carrying fish. And
Yep.
this goes back to your original point that you mentioned a while back, is that this is a
Yep.
foreign, no pun intended, tactic
Yep.
that we don't have any understanding of at the present time, but we're about, we being the allies are about to get an education.
Yeah, and that, and we're also at very long range. So to clarify, the Japanese had made some attacks on Singapore itself
Hmm.
at this time using their G3Ms in a medium bomber capacity. But the belief on the part of the British was that they had only used a few aircraft and they had armed them very lightly, like maybe one 250 kilogram bomb or something like that. And so the belief was that the Japanese were straining to the absolute limit of their range to make it all the way over to Singapore. And that therefore, there's no way that at this distance away from those airfields that the Japanese would be able to lug a torpedo out that far. And
Hmm.
obviously, we know, the Japanese are operating at the end of their range and well beyond the range that something like a Heinkel 111 would have been able to lug a torpedo. So again, to a certain extent, Phillips is within his rights to not
Sure.
believe that he's within the envelope of torpedo armed aircraft, but he's going to be disabused of that notion here very rapidly.
As we said when we talked about the Battle of the Philippine Sea a couple of years ago now,
Yeah,
that you can't fight Godzilla if you don't know Godzilla exists.
right.
And this is very
That's
similar in
yeah,
this.
that's what's
So
going on.
at 11:41, the Nells come in. As you said, they're going at both ships from both bows. They split up into further smaller groups, smaller
Yep, groups
packets,
of 3. Yep.
groups of three. Um, and apparently, the British AAA was pretty damn heavy. The Brits
Yeah.
are shooting everything they got, understandably. Prince of Wales actually bags one of the Nells and damages three more, but it
Hmm.
did not matter because these guys are coming in regardless.
Yep.
They drop on Prince of Wales first. Her skipper, Captain Leach, he turned hard to port and was able to actually comb the first bunch of torpedoes that head towards him. And by that, he turns into them and
Yep.
runs right. They run right alongside. The second group, launched at Prince of Wales, however, is more successful. One torpedo hits her at 11:44, so 3 minutes after the Japanese launched their attack, if you will.
Yep.
And this is a big kaboom, John.
It is devastating. And it's interesting because we didn't really understand the full impact of this hit until they did an underwater survey of the wreck
Mhm.
that Bill Garsky was a part of. And what ends up happening is that this torpedo ends up hitting near the port side outer shaft, right on the again, if Drac were here, on the thing that is holding the
Mhm.
outboard shaft in place, and just wrecks this the propeller shaft to the point that the shaft, now being released from its stanchion or whatever, is just thrashing around wildly and ends up just basically chewing the guts out of the afterport engine room on this battleship. It destroys the watertight seals, the glands
Mhm.
around the shaft, and just, you know, you think about it, this is a huge piece of steel. It's got enormous torque on it. In some cases, propeller shaft will actually be, two complete revolutions on that shaft. So just think about the amount of energy that's stored up in terms of potential energy on that thing. If it's released, holy God. The result is just, it just destroys this engine room and floods it, and that ends up taking power offline for all of the after 5.25-inch mounts. So it's a real haymaker. It's
Yeah, it
devastating
is.
for this ship, and just it also reduces her speed from 25 knots to just 16, and
Yeah.
gives her an 11-degree list as well. Yeah,
2,400 tons of seawater
yeah, a
enter the
destroyer's
after
worth.
end of this battleship.
Right,
And like now, I mean, it's
right.
not, eventual, it is right now. And her speed, you said 16 knots. Again, it's like, you know, running and then hitting a puddle of quicksand. It just goes, yeah, it just slows down
Yeah,
right friggin' now.
yeah.
And as we're going to see, this is really what dooms her is the very first hit. I mean, the other ones
Yeah,
obviously, rip her guts out, but this is really what eventually
it,
it seals her
it
fate.
kills her from a firepower standpoint, from
Hmm.
the standpoint of being able to defend herself. And it's interesting too, because when you look at some of the other, what we would call a fluke hit, they're not all that fluky actually. When
Right.
you've got propeller shafts and four of them outside of a warship. Bismarck likewise, she is doomed because of a fluke torpedo hit that jams her rudder. Things like this kind of happen. But yeah, the result is that Prince of Wales is just crippled by this first hit and is no longer going to be able to really defend herself, or really to defend Prince of or Repulse, because Prince of Wales has got the by far the better
Oh yeah.
heavy anti-aircraft suite, and so if you knock her out, you've diminished the total defensive firepower of this force probably by like 75%. It's really bad.
Speaking of repulse, she
Yeah.
comes under attack at the same, or I think like a minute or two later or whatever.
Yep.
She is she was already more maneuverable than Prince of Wales. Now she's significantly more maneuverable than Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
Her skipper,
That
Captain
dude.
Tennant,
Yeah.
evades no less than 15 torpedoes launched his way and attacks by two separate squadrons
Yeah.
by
This
just
dude.
skewing
Yeah.
this thing all over the water.
Yeah. This dude knew how to drive his ship. Yeah. Even having taken that bomb hit. So yeah, the result is the repulse comes out of these initial torpedo attacks scot-free. But she is not in a position to really do much for Prince of Wales, which is, yeah, kind of blugging around at this point. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Captain Tennant the skipper of Repulse, on his own authority now says, "The hell with this radio silence crap." And
Yep.
he sends a message to Singapore saying, "We are under attack by Japanese aircraft." This is
Hmm.
when the Brewsters are actually scrambled, but it's gonna
Too
be
late
too
now.
late. There's nothing you
Yep.
can do. Um, the effects, as we talked about on this torpedo hit on Prince of Wales, is just it's absolutely devastating. Aside from what we talked about, the list and the water and the
Yep.
thrashing of the prop shaft and all this other jazz, she has her communications are down, ventilation, steering gear, more pumps are lost because there's no power back there.
Yep.
Um, she she's
And now,
barely. Go ahead.
yeah, she's steaming on her starboard engines only at this
Yeah,
point, which
yeah,
obviously makes it kind of difficult to maneuver the ship.
correct.
Yeah, and not only that, but with the power out to your after mounts, those are useless. And the
Even if they could
combination,
be bought to bear, yeah,
exactly. I mean, you can operate them manually, but they're
locally,
not going
yeah.
to be hardly effective at all.
Hmm.
And because you have a list on this ship, that means that the mounts, the forward mounts that still do have power, the ones that are on the what do I want to say, the upside of the deck aren't able to depress their barrels low enough to engage a low flying aircraft coming in from the starboard side, meaning that the only high level guns that are actually usable are the port forward mounts on Prince of Wales at this point. It's
Yeah,
not a good situation.
not at all. At 12:20, Canoia's 26 Bettys come into view, and these are
Here
yeah
come the haymakers, you
the
know.
A team, the A
Yep,
team.
here's the A team.
Prince of Wales is just limping along at 15 knots, and as I put in the notes, Repulse is absolutely hauling ass.
The
She's
25.
25 knots. She's like,
Yep,
"I am out of here."
yep,
Um, Captain Leach aboard Prince of Wales knew, to your point exactly, that there was absolutely, there was very little he could do. He would
yep,
just kind of hoped for the best. And her AAA is significantly
degraded.
slackened.
Yep,
And to that end, the Bettys pressed their attack to within 550 yards ish. Actually, it's a little bit more than that, I think, of Prince of Wales, fly right over her mast, and they're gone
yeah.
within 20 minutes.
And the reason that they're looking to attack Prince of Wales' starboard side, because with her port list at this point, that means that her armor belt is going to be
Hmm.
lifted potentially out of the water, which means that we have a torpedo that's running 8 or 10 feet. It's likely that that torpedo now, if it's coming in from the upside, is going to be able to get underneath that armor
In her
belt.
belly.
Yep,
Yep.
into her belly and underneath her torpedo protection system. So that's why they're going after her from the starboard side.
And that is precisely what happens. So she's
Yep.
essentially unable to evade these torpedoes. Three of them
Yes.
absolutely just eviscerate her. One at the very end of her bow, another near B turret, and another on her stern, all on the starboard side.
Yep.
The one on her stern in particular is really the worst one because there's already damage on that area, admittedly on the opposite side,
On the
but
inside.
it's still on the stern.
Yep.
And this just, it kills her power right now.
Yep.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
all
So
power.
hits her other shaft, and the result is that yeah, she goes dead in the water immediately.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Repulse is about a mile away. As we said, she's cruising. She's trying to get out of there as fast as she can. She's maneuvering as well. Um, she evaded all the fish that were launched out of the first time, but not so much the second time. The
Right.
first torpedoes dropped on Repulse by the Kanoya group are dropped at extreme range, and
Hmm.
Tennant was able to avoid them yet again, but he's in his turn. And as he's in his
Yes.
turn, avoiding this first batch of fish that have been launched at him, another group comes in and they put pay to him, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this before. Repulse ends up collecting 3 hits at this point, and actually she gets 4. The first one is on her port side, and that one she kind of shrugs off. But the next 3 that come in all hit her on one side, and the result is that yeah, her side protection is just it's just not built for this kind of thing. She's a World
Mm,
War One era combatant, and she's got the side protection to show for it. And when she collects these 3 hits in quick succession, she just gets clobbered, and
Yeah.
basically she sinks right now. She goes down in within about
15 minutes.
15 minutes, or
Yeah.
even a little faster than that. As soon as she is hit, one of the men remembered that the word came over on the PA, blow up your life belts. And then very quickly thereafter, they are ordered to go over the side. The problem is that because she goes down as quickly as she does, Repulse is going to end up taking more men down with her than are going to be lost on the Prince of Wales, which is it's kind of a pity. I mean, because again, Captain Tennant, that guy really knew how to drive his ship and did so extremely successfully up until the very end. But when she finally takes that damage, yeah, she just can't withstand it.
Yeah, the communicate when she and when you say those three torpedoes hit her almost all at once, I mean it was literally like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
Within seconds of one another, and apparently that killed comms down below into
right.
the bowels of the ship. So when Tennant get almost it feels when Tennant gives word to everybody go, abandon ship, a lot
Yep,
of those guys don't get that word.
yep.
And to your point, Repulse had a list of 30 degrees, and within minutes, she was at 60 degrees. So, I mean,
She's
it's like
Yeah, it's
goodbye.
Oklahoma all over again. Is kind of what it comes down to. You've got to get off this ship immediately, or you're going down with her. And so, unfortunately, a lot of her engineering gang, her black gang, ends up, yeah, drowning in the innards of this ship because they just can't get out.
Terrible way to go.
Yep.
Prince of Wales is afloat, albeit
Hmm.
just barely. She's got 18,000 tons of seawater inside of her, estimated. She's down by the stern and sinking very, very quickly. Destroyers are ordered to come alongside and help get some of the crew or help get the crew off of her. And they
Hmm.
wind up setting these gangways. There's pictures of this. They
Yeah.
set like, well, they're gangways from
Yeah.
Prince of Wales to the destroyer. And as Prince of Wales is starting to roll even
Yeah.
quicker, the gangways fall off. They fall into the water. Of course, guys go into the water with them. Prince of Wales damn near rolls on top of one of these destroyers
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
process, and that was a horrible situation right there.
Yep. Yeah. And we will see this again actually in 1942 when Kirishima almost rolls over on top of a Japanese destroyer that is alongside her. So yeah, um, kudos to destroyer captains who just are a different breed of cat,
Indeed.
for being alongside. But yeah, the bottom line is that Prince of Wales goes down, hangs on her beam ends, and eventually goes down by 1333, leaving
Yeah.
well over 1,000 people in the water.
327 men are killed, are lost, I should say, with Prince of Wales. 513, many of which were below decks, are lost aboard Repulse.
Yep,
Japanese casualties are 18 men and three aircraft.
yep, yeah. So for the price of 49 torpedoes expended, you have just absolutely shellacked Force Z. Another one of those aircraft is going to crash on landing. There are about a dozen planes that are damaged, but this is a walkover, just an
Mhm.
incredible walkover. And I'm unclear as to it seems that both Captain Leach of Prince of Wales and Admiral Phillips chose to go down with Prince of Wales. I
I don't know about Phillips, but I'm
Yeah,
fairly certain that Leach did
yeah,
because of the fact that Leach, as the ship is rolling, and we talked about the gangways are snapping and the damn thing almost rolls on top of the destroyers,
yeah,
he's walking around the deck asking for volunteers to stay aboard and help save the ship. So he was convinced, or at least
yeah.
for a
Up until
moment,
at the very end, yeah,
yeah, that this thing could be saved, and which is
weird
sad and weird at the same time. But, bottom line is the bodies of neither of these gentlemen
or
are are,
recovered.
are recovered. So they died with the ship. And I don't know about Phillips, but I'm fairly certain that Leach decided he's like, you know what, I'm going down with my ship
Yeah,
because of the fact that he was desperately still trying to seek volunteers, of which there were several that were like, yeah, sure, I'll stay aboard to help you. And to save the
Yeah,
ship as she's rolling over.
right.
So
Not good.
not at all. So let's talk about old Winnie and how he receives the word. This is a smack in the mouth to Winston
Yeah,
Churchill here.
yeah. He rates this as one of the worst blows that he ever receives. So yeah, he receives word of the sinkings from First Sea Lord Dudley Pound. Pound calls him up and says, Mr. Prime Minister, I have to report to you that the Prince of Wales and the Repulse have been both sunk by the Japanese. We think by aircraft. Tom Phillips is drowned. And Churchill replies, are you sure it's true? Pound. There is no doubt at all. And Churchill writes later, in all the war, I never received a more direct shock. As I turned over and twisted in bed, the full horror of the news sank in upon me. There were no British or American ships in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific, except the American survivors of Pearl Harbor who were hastening back to California. Across this vast expanse of waters, Japan was supreme, and we everywhere were weak and naked. I would point out that Churchill says much the same when Tobruk falls in June of 1942. He's got a number of direct
Greatest
and
shocks of the war.
greatest shocks in his books, but it's no question in my mind, at least, that this is pretty handily. It's a top three or a bottom three moment as far as the prime minister is concerned. And along with that, of course, has to come a certain amount of I don't want to
Guilt?
say guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that
Yeah.
set these guys up, and I sent a guy who used to be a friend, to his death. And it's pretty clear that, despite the fact that he and Phillips had kind of been on the outs immediately before this, that he was very affected by Phillips' death and took it very hard. So, um,
What
and
does this do to the British morale? I mean, we know that
it's
it's a
terrible.
kick in the nuts to Churchill, but I mean,
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
British war effort as a whole.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. As H.P. Wilmot notes in his history of this particular campaign, that the loss of Force Z was like the stone being rolled into place over the tomb. Because at this
Mm,
point, if you're a British soldier in Malaya, you know that if things go pear-shaped in this
you're on your own.
campaign, you're on your own, baby. The Royal Navy is not going to be able to bail us out of this thing. Um, this absolutely guarantees that the Japanese will have the ability to reinforce Yamashita's army within Malaya. They can now run transports with complete impunity, at least onto the east coast of Malaya at this point. And, certainly from the Japanese standpoint, this is a real shot in the arm. Admiral Nagano, who's the chief of staff in the Navy at this point, immediately sends a cable to his German counterpart, Admiral Erich Raeder, saying Bismarck is avenged. So, the Japanese understand the implications of this. We have now secured for ourselves absolute naval supremacy around this area of operations, which is going to be crucial for making sure that the ground campaign goes our way.
So what do these sinkings do for Singapore? I mean, we already know, but I mean,
Yeah,
it seals its fate. I mean, that's it.
yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, the Japanese army has yet to demonstrate that it has taken the
Yeah.
measure of the British army. We haven't fought our first big battle at Jitra. That's going to happen tomorrow. But the tea leaves are not reading very propitiously, at least in terms of naval and air power here within this campaign. And so, yeah, for the British, this is not looking good.
Mm-mm.
So, yeah. Anyway,
So I know people are gonna ask, or just the wrecks today of both
mm,
of these vessels. Repulse is only in like 190 some odd feet of water. She's not deep, and Prince of
POW
Wales is a
stuff.
little bit deeper, but not a
230. Yep.
yeah, not a whole lot. But point
Yep.
being is that these wrecks, as you said, have been surveyed at least twice by,
Now they're
but
mostly gone.
yeah,
They
yeah.
have been destroyed by Chinese aqua bandits. I'm just going to call them what they are. The deal is that steel that has not been exposed to the radiation of the
Mhm.
atomic bombings in Japan is incredibly valuable for medical instruments. And so, not only these wrecks, but also a number of wrecks in the Java Sea that are going to be
Mhm.
fought just a few months later have also been just absolutely raised down to the seabed in order to get the steel, which is a despoiling of wartime graves and is illegal. Again, there's almost 1,000, more than 800 British sailors lost their lives on these two wrecks. And by international law, those wrecks remain the property of the
Mhm.
nations that lost them. So for the Chinese to be sending a ship here that basically strip mined these graves is disgusting. They did actually apprehend this particular ship. The Malaysian authorities, you know, took it under, arrested them basically for not having proper paperwork. I don't know the status of that particular ship, but yeah, I can think of things that I would like to do to that crew that are not necessarily terribly humane. So
There, there
it's
were pictures after this became news not long ago. It was only a
it's
couple of years
20,
ago.
yeah, only a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, there were pictures of uh, pieces of steel on the shore after these things had been, as you said, stripped bare
Yeah.
by these guys, and several shots included heavy naval shells.
Yep.
And to what size? With 15-inch, 14, I don't know. But the little devil on my shoulder went, man, what if one of those things had cooked off?
Cooked off.
Like,
Oops.
sorry, guys.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah,
But
but they
yeah,
didn't. But they
anyway.
didn't.
So
All
yeah,
right.
think about and just now pulling it back, big picture to the war. Um, and this is a comment that Alan Zim made in his book about Pearl Harbor. If you look at the number of capital ship losses that the Allies suffer within about a 2 month time period, because we don't think about what's happened to the Royal Navy immediately before this. Ark Royal has been sunk in the Mediterranean. Barham was blown to
Hmm.
bits, also in the Mediterranean. Um, Two British battleships have been disabled in Alexandria Harbor and are currently sitting on the bottom there. They were
Hmm.
put paid to by Italian frogmen
Yeah,
in
limpet mines. Yeah.
limpet mines, right? So they're both sitting there. The Americans have just lost five battleships sunk in Pearl Harbor. All of them are sitting on the bottom at this point. The Repulse and the Prince of Wales have just been sunk as well. And I forget what the exact percentage is, but it's like a third or 40% of the total inventory of British and American capital ships has been either damaged or disabled in the last 2 or 3 months of the war. Again, we have the ability from 80 years removed to kind of look at this. Yeah, but it's all going to come out in the end. Man, if you're sitting
You
here on
didn't know that.
December 10th in 1942, it's like, oh, damn, we're hemorrhaging warships. This is not a good situation to be in at the beginning of a Japanese offensive whose scale and ferocity at this point is completely unknown.
Yeah. And the loss of ships of that size and caliber
Mm-hmm.
cannot be underestimated to a nation's, we talked about this when we did Pearl Harbor, is that, it was a morale-based thing too.
Yeah,
And then or will to fight, I guess, is a more appropriate way to put it, because you have these big bad battle wagons and aircraft carrier here and there, and then all of a sudden kablooey, they're gone.
yeah,
And this is not something you can make up for tomorrow.
right.
These are
Sure.
long-term building projects. These are a lot of human beings that live and work and sail on these things.
Yeah,
Tremendous amounts of national treasure in terms of just cash that
yeah,
is used to build these things. And it's not just, and I think that's one of the things that I wish people would understand more, is that, yeah, losing a battleship sucks because those are, 14-inch, 15-inch, 16-inch guns that are out of the war, but it's just the financial impact and that manpower impact of the
Yep.
loss of these things that is just staggering. So
Yeah.
when, Roosevelt is given the play-by-play in the Oval Office, the night of Pearl Harbor, and
Right.
all of his, senators are, aghast. It's not that wasn't dramatic. That wasn't the flair for the dramatic. That was honest to God, like, oh my God. So
Yeah.
when Churchill receives this news, it's oh my God, because
Yep.
this is just
Yeah.
bad news, man.
It's bad news. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Japanese have now demonstrated very conclusively, yes, we can sink a battleship that's underway. We can do that very easily. And the contemptuous ease with which they did it too, that is stunning.
And how
Absolutely
fast
stunning.
these things went down too. I
Yeah,
mean, just
right. Yeah,
boom,
this
right
this
now.
whole battle is, what, about 2 hours in duration.
Hmm.
So, yikes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mhm. And it doesn't get any better for the
it's
next
not going to get
several
any.
months.
Yes, yes, it's not. Yeah, because next week we are going to go back and talk about ground combat, and I'm looking forward to the Battle of Jitra. Because spoiler alert, it don't go well either. So
It
anyway,
do not. It do
yep,
not. All right. Are you good?
I'm good, man.
Cool. And by the way, as we're recording this, which is the 28th of October, Tuesday, this coming Friday, which is Halloween, if
Yes,
hanging out isn't scary enough, we're going to record our Q&As on, or
yes,
two of them anyway, on that
yes,
very day. So if you're watching this, next week is going to be the Battle of Jitra and the early portion of the Malayan campaign, and then a couple weeks after that is going to be some of our Q&A episodes. So
right.
stand by because those will be fun. They always are.
In a state of questionable sobriety.
At least the second one will be anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. All right, well,
Excellent.
let's wrap it. So, with
Yep.
that, we want to thank you very much for listening and or watching this episode of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. Give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. If you got a comment, send a question to, or send a comment to Unauthorized History of try again, stupid. Unauthorized Pacific Podcast at gmail.com. Once again, my name is Seth Paridon. I want to thank you very much for listening and or watching. John, my friend, as always, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you again next week.